I couldn't imagine me carrying a rifle, crawling from one foxhole to another with mud in the bottom of them, fighting a war, shooting at one person at a time. I thought there was something I could do to improve the happenings around me by enlisting in the Air Force, working on airplanes that I was happy with. I knew a lot about airplanes, and I thought that would be the best thing I could do to support the military action. I enlisted. I was 1A. I could have been drafted any time.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes. I enlisted in Kansas City, and that night I was on a train headed for San Antonio, Texas. We got to San Antonio and they processed us in at about 3 a.m. the next morning. They wanted to get acquainted that you would not be on night 8 to 5. And it was getting a lot of information about you, your history, and your full name and your serial number. They gave us your serial number, 17289-239. They said, memorize that, you will need it. In San Antonio for 1 week for processing in. And then they shipped me to Wichita Falls Shepherd Air Force Base. And that's where I went through basic training and finally going through aircraft engine and mechanic school. After I'd been through the schooling, I was shipped to Luke Air Force Base near Phoenix, Arizona. And Luke Air Force Base was a training base for fighter pilots. I was a jet engine mechanic and worked on the engines, took them in and out of the airplane and made sure that the engine was in good working condition before they put it back in the airplane and they were to take off and fly missions.
Did you see any combat in your time in the military?
I never traded bullets with anybody. I did my job, which was contributed to make sure that America was the leading one in winning the war. 3 Stripes, which is originally was a sergeant, and after the Air Force went to changing things, they made it Airman First Class. I went through the steps of the 3rd class, 2nd class, and then 1st class. I think mainly while I was overseas. The base I was stationed at had a sign above the mess hall door that stated the best fed men in the Far East passed through these doors. That was a true statement of the food that we had there for at least a year. And we had steak 3 times a week.
How did you guys entertain yourselves?
Well, on the base we had a theater that you could go and watch a movie any night. And we could go downtown and eat in a restaurant if you wanted to. Part of my time I was over at the base photo lab, and that's where I got my interest in education in photography. And the Japanese that worked in the charge of the photo lab was very helpful in understanding what a good picture was and how to take them. And it was really nice. You could make any kind of a picture you wanted and develop the film, print pictures, and that was part of our entertainment.
Who were your main buddies while in the Air Force?
Okay, Julius Dean was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I tried to contact him when I was living down there, but I never made contact. Francis Murphy was another one. He was something else. He was older, but he was still part of our group. One time we went to the gunnery range where we all took the military carbine rifle and fired shots at targets. He was the only one on a base of 700 people that the target, the bullseye, was torn out. There wasn't another bullet hole anywhere else on that target. He was a perfect shooter. I call him a West Virginia windage guy. He was good. One of my friends in aircraft mechanic school was a friend of mine that wanted to be on jet airplanes. He was shipped to an air base where it was multi-engine aircraft, and he ended up a engineer on a C-46 freight airplane, and he was over in Japan same time I was, but we were about 500 miles apart. Never did get together. But I saw in the Air Force Times magazine one time that an airplane had crashed at that base. And the next time the paper come out, I searched again, and he was one of them that went down with the airplane. So he didn't make it home. He was a good friend, though. I was almost glad to leave when we did come home. I rode over on the boat in a troop ship. It was a tub, really. There were 5,000 of us on there. Air Force, Army, Marines, and Navy. 5,000 of us on that boat. 12 and a half days going. And one day before we got to Japan, we went through a typhoon, which in America is a hurricane. And the boat was pretty rough riding, but we got through it. It was August the 11th, 1954, at an air base in California. After we got off the boat at San Francisco, they took us to this air base. And it was probably about 5 days processing, getting ready to process us out. I got my discharge, honorable of course, and went to get on a bus. I rode a bus to Phoenix, to Albuquerque, New Mexico, Denver, and then Salina, Kansas, where her family picked me up. I went back to the farm. That's what I had been used to in civilian life. I worked on the farm, and in the wintertime, there was not much farm work, so I went to a bigger town near there and worked in a filling station. I also took college training. I went to a college for 1 year and got some education there. And it was after that that I went more into photography. Well, the Korean War was a bad war, really. North Korea had attacked South Korea, and that's how America got into it, because South Korea was our associate nations. We went in to defend South Korea. General MacArthur led the battles, and it was a slow battle at first because the enemy had the upper hand. That's kind of the way all wars were for America. And General MacArthur was leading, and he, after he got our troops to going, he went on up to the Chosin Reservoir and took a battle into there, and that was where it was near the Yalu River, which was into Manchuria. And MacArthur was going to take his troops, go on into Manchuria and on up, and put a whip on Russia, because they were really a basic enemy of us too. He got pulled off his job by President Truman, and not much became of that. And the Korean War was, we lost 30,000 plus troops over there that died fighting the war. And it include Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, all of it. I was before we went, I was in the harvest field sitting in a truck, hauling wheat to the elevator. The radio I heard them announce on the radio that South Korea had been attacked. That was on June the 25th, 1950. And the war went until they finally decided to have an armistice on July the 27th, 1953. That's when they called an end to the fighting. That war is not won yet. It's still in a situation where people are staring across the battle lines at each other. And it's not the way we fought the war in World War II. We fought there to win. Korean War, and end up also in Vietnam, it was not a war to win. It was a war to try to stop the enemy and to get them to quit. That don't work out. You go to war to fight to win on the engine crew. Two of them had been in the Japanese Navy during World War II. And they were interesting to talk to. They'd come on duty at 8 o'clock in the morning and say, "Good morning, Sergeant, how are you?" And I'd answer them in Japanese, "Ai kataraju genki desu." They'd just get excited because I could talk to them in some Japanese. Christmas time, before I came back, the last Christmas I was there was 4 ladies, Japanese, that put on a program for a group of us. There's probably 50 airmen there. And they put on a program that was entertaining and thought-provoking. And the last thing they did when they were closing it out, I don't remember for sure, but I think it was, "God bless America." They don't believe in God. They don't believe in Jesus. But they had learned the words of that song to please the Americans that they were entertaining. And that was really interesting. And when they got through with that, I don't think there was anybody with a dry eye. Because God bless America.